She stood there in plain clothes while a junior officer prepared to arrest her. What he didn't know was that she was the reason his entire command center existed. This is the story of how one Marine major taught a harsh lesson about judging people by their appearance. The young lieutenant's voice carried across the operations floor with casual authority. "You've taken a wrong turn." His name tag read Miller, and his pristine white Navy uniform still had creases from the packaging. He positioned himself as a guardian at the entrance to the Joint Operations Center, arms crossed loosely. Allison Grant kept her eyes fixed on the enormous wall display. The map stretched from floor to ceiling, covered with blinking data points, satellite paths, and coded communication links that moved in constant rhythm. She felt the low vibration of the building's pulse, servers humming, cooling systems running, analysts speaking quietly in multiple languages. This sound was deeply familiar to her. Her royal blue shirt stood out sharply against the sea of desert tan, naval white, and Air Force blue surrounding her. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a simple knot. To Lieutenant Miller, she didn't belong. She disrupted the careful order of his watch. "I'm speaking to you," he said, moving closer. The smell of fresh starch drifted from his uniform. "This area is restricted." Allison finally turned, her movements calm and deliberate. She looked at him with eyes the color of winter sky, steady and piercing. She raised her common access card, the green-backed credential, pinched between two fingers. Her voice was level, with a low tone that cut through the ambient noise easily. No anger, no defense, just fact. Miller glanced at the card, then back at her face. A small, patronizing smile appeared. "A contractor badge. I still need to confirm your clearance for this level of the facility." He didn't take the card. Instead, he pointed toward a security station near the door. "Come with me, and we'll sort this out." He'd already decided who she was. The blue shirt, the hair, the fact that she was a woman standing alone in a place of tremendous power. It all formed a single wrong conclusion in his mind. He saw a secretary, maybe an advisor's assistant, perhaps a translator who'd wandered from her cubicle. He didn't see the person responsible for the entire operation around him. "That's not necessary," Allison said, keeping her voice steady. The project name, a word spoken only inside secured rooms like this, should have stopped him immediately. It should have made him reconsider. Instead, it made him bolder. He saw it not as proof, but as something she'd simply overheard. "Everyone thinks they're here for the Chimera briefing," he said with a condescending laugh. "But access to the main observation area is restricted to flag officers and senior command staff." He was now actively blocking her path, his posture shifting from casual to possessive. A few nearby analysts lifted their headsets slightly and started watching. These quiet confrontations were rare entertainment from the flood of global intelligence work. "Lieutenant," Allison said, and for the first time, a hint of ice entered her tone. "Take my card, scan it, read the name, read the position description." The directness of her command, so different from her civilian clothes, finally seemed to register. Uncertainty flashed across his face, but was quickly replaced by irritation. He felt his authority being challenged, and here, authority meant everything. He grabbed the card from her fingers with unnecessary force. He stomped to the security station, his polished shoes squeaking on the spotless floor. An Air Force senior airman watched with professional neutrality as he aggressively shoved the card into the reader. He squinted at the screen, his forehead creasing. He expected to see a company logo, a contractor label, a basic clearance level. What appeared made no sense to him. Grant, Allison J., Major, USMCR, clearance level TS/SCI/SAP, position Senior Consultant, Project Chimera, reporting to Joint Chiefs of Staff, Major, United States Marine Corps Reserve. Top secret, sensitive compartmented information special access program. He read it 3 times. A major? This woman? He looked back at her, standing perfectly calm amid the controlled chaos. Her hands rested casually in her pockets. She looked like she could teach high school. He'd met Marine majors before. They were men with square jaws and military haircuts who looked like they ate steel for breakfast. They were not her. His mind refused to accept the data. It had to be wrong. An expired card? A system error? This credential has expired, he announced loudly. He was playing to the small audience now, trying to reclaim control. Or it's been printed incorrectly. There's no error, Lieutenant, Allison said, her voice carrying across the space. The error is yours. I need to make a verification call, Miller said, puffing his chest out. We can't have civilians carrying fake military identification. He was escalating, doubling down on his first assumption, because the alternative, that he'd just condescendingly challenged a field-grade officer from another service who possessed clearances far higher than his own, was too embarrassing to accept. He picked up a secure phone, turning his back to her as if she were a suspect under investigation. Allison's gaze moved away from him, sweeping across the room. She saw the faces of analysts, some curious, some annoyed by the disruption. She saw the master clocks displaying multiple time zones. And at the far end of the observation area, she spotted a familiar face. Master Chief Petty Officer Torres, whose face told the story of 30 years in naval communications, was watching. His headset was off. He wasn't looking at her, but at Lieutenant Miller. As he watched the young officer talk into the phone, Torres's eyes narrowed with slow, dawning understanding. He'd seen her name on the initial Chimera access list. Grant. It hadn't registered then, but seeing her here, seeing the quiet, unshakable presence she projected even facing this foolish challenge, the old stories and classified reports began surfacing in his memory. Allison's hand went into her pocket, her fingers closing around a cool, heavy metal disc. It was a challenge coin, its edges worn smooth from years of carrying. Miller's accusation of fraud stung, not because it was true, but because it was the complete opposite of her truth. The coin in her hand proved that truth. As she felt the raised design of the eagle, anchor, and trident under her thumb, the sterile air of the operations center faded away, replaced by memories of dust and the sharp smell of gunpowder. The coin hadn't been given to her in a ceremony. It had been pressed into her palm in the back of a shaking transport plane, lit by the hellish red glow of tactical lights. They were banking hard away from a contested valley in Kunar Province. Below them, a landscape of deadly, unforgiving mountains scrolled past. The man who gave it to her was a Delta Force colonel, his face smeared with camouflage paint and exhaustion, his uniform torn and stained. His team, a dozen of the most skilled operators on the planet, were alive because of a ghost they'd never seen, a voice on the radio they knew only by her call sign. He'd leaned close, his voice a rough whisper over the roar of engines. "Warlock 6, he'd said, using the name that was both her shield and her weapon. My team is breathing because you can hear whispers in static." He'd folded her fingers over the coin, its weight a silent, profound acknowledgement of a debt that could never be spoken openly. The coin was from his own unit, a token never given to outsiders. It symbolized trust earned in the crucible, recognition of lethality that had nothing to do with a rifle and everything to do with the mind. A sharp, indignant voice from Lieutenant Miller snapped her back to the present. He was practically shouting now, the phone still pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir, I have her here. A woman, long blonde hair. Yes, wearing a blue shirt, claiming to be a Marine major. The system shows clearance, but it must be a database error." He was proud of himself. He was following procedure. He was protecting the command center. In his own mind, he was the hero of this situation. He didn't see Master Chief Torres, who'd heard the name Grant mentioned with Project Chimera and was now moving with purpose that defied his age. Torres ignored the phone at the station. He walked to his own console, his fingers flying across a keyboard, opening an encrypted chat channel reserved for command staff. His message was brief, stripped of pleasantries, charged with urgency that would be instantly understood at the highest levels. Torres, MCPO, urgent. LT Miller is detaining Warlock 6 at the Operations Center entrance. He hit send. He knew the call sign was a risk. It wasn't official. It wasn't in any personnel file. But it was a legend, and he was betting that in the room where the Chimera briefing was about to happen, that legend was known. Back at the station, Lieutenant Miller remained oblivious. He was savoring the final moments of his victory. He hung up the phone with a decisive click. "All right," he said, turning back to Allison, his voice firm and official. "My commanding officer agrees. Your credentials can't be verified. We need you to come with us. Security is on the way. I'd suggest you cooperate fully." He'd crossed the final line. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a threat. He'd accused a decorated field-grade officer of fraud and was preparing to have her escorted out of the one place she was most needed. Allison Grant didn't reply. She simply watched the main doors to the observation area, her expression unreadable. She'd faced far more dangerous men than this inflated lieutenant. She'd learned in the harshest environments that patience was a weapon, and sometimes you just had to let someone dig their own grave. Miller mistook her silence for fear, for surrender. He was about to learn in the most public and unforgettable way possible how wrong he was. The urgent message from Master Chief Torres appeared on a private monitor inside the flag-level conference room adjacent to the operations center. The room was soundproof, its occupants shielded from the drama unfolding yards away. An Air Force Lieutenant General, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and 2 stars on her collar, was mid-sentence, outlining a strategic objective. A Navy Vice Admiral, the overall commander of the Joint Task Force, sat at the head of the table, flanked by a Coast Guard Vice Admiral. The Navy Admiral's aide, a young commander, saw the message appear on his tablet. His eyes widened. He stood up, breaking protocol, and walked quickly to the Admiral, leaning down to whisper in his ear. The effect on the room was instantaneous and electric. The Air Force General stopped talking. The Coast Guard Admiral sat bolt upright. The Navy Vice Admiral's face, moments before a mask of calm authority, hardened into something resembling a thunderstorm. He didn't need clarification. He knew exactly who Warlock 6 was. He'd read the classified reports that were still legendary at the National Security Agency and Special Operations Command. He knew that Project Chimera, the multi-billion-dollar intelligence fusion program they were about to be briefed on, was her creation. It wasn't just a program she consulted on, she was its chief architect. "On screen," the Admiral commanded, his voice a low growl. The aide tapped his tablet, and the main screen in the conference room, which had been displaying satellite imagery, switched to a live security feed of the operations center. They saw everything. Lieutenant Miller standing with his chest puffed out, the nervous senior airman at the security station, and Allison Grant standing alone in her blue shirt, calm, patient, surrounded by an invisible, unreachable wall of dignity. The Admiral's gaze fixed on her. He'd never met her in person, but he'd seen her file. He swiped on his own tablet, pulling it up. The screen glowed with accomplishments that made most career officers look like amateurs. Bronze Star with Valor device, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, citations filled with clipped, astonishing phrases, under direct fire, fused disparate intelligence streams to provide life-saving targeting data, Her analysis directly led to the neutralization of 3 high-value targets, credited with saving the lives of 14 members of Task Force 121. "He's detaining a national asset," the Air Force general said, her voice tight with disbelief and fury. The Navy admiral stood up, his chair scraping back harshly. "He's not detaining anyone," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He looked at the other 2 flag officers. Back on the operations floor, Lieutenant Miller's patience was wearing thin. The security team he'd called hadn't arrived yet, and the woman's unnerving calm was getting under his skin. He decided to press his advantage, to cement his authority before armed guards arrived. "I'm giving you a final chance," he said, taking a step toward her. "You can admit this was all a misunderstanding, a foolish prank, maybe. If you come clean now, we can potentially resolve this without involving federal agents." He let the threat hang in the air, imagining its effect. He was sure she would break, that she would finally confess. He was completely unprepared for what happened next. With a soft pneumatic hiss, the main doors to the observation area slid open. The subtle, ever-present hum of the operations center seemed to vanish, sucked into a sudden absolute vacuum of silence. Every operator, every analyst, every person on that floor, no matter how absorbed in their work, felt the shift in atmosphere. It was the primal, instinctual recognition of apex predators entering the environment. 3 of them. Vice Admiral Stanton, the task force commander, a man whose presence could command a room with a single glance. Lieutenant General Wallace, the Air Force's top intelligence officer, a woman known for her piercing intellect and zero tolerance for incompetence. And Vice Admiral Hayes of the Coast Guard, a quiet, formidable man in charge of all maritime homeland security. 3 flag officers, a constellation of 9 stars moving together with singular, unstoppable purpose. They strode onto the floor, their aides scrambling to keep pace. The entire room snapped to attention, 100 bodies moving as one, a rustle of uniforms and scraping of chairs that sounded like a single sharp thunderclap. All except 2. Lieutenant Miller, who was frozen in place, his mouth half open, his final foolish threat dying on his lips. And Allison Grant, who simply watched them approach. Stanton didn't look at Miller. He didn't look at anyone else. His eyes were locked on Allison. He, Wallace, and Hayes marched directly to her, their path cleaving through the stunned and silent crowd. They stopped precisely 3 feet in front of her. And then, in perfect synchronized unison, the 3 admirals snapped to the sharpest, most respectful salute Lieutenant Miller had ever seen in his life. Their hands cut through the air, crisp and exact. It wasn't the perfunctory salute given to a junior officer. It was the salute of deference, the salute one gives to a peer, or in this case, to someone whose specific, crucial value transcended normal hierarchy. "Major Grant," Vice Admiral Stanton said, his voice booming in the cathedral-like silence, "my apologies for the delay. We were just convening." A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the room. People who'd been watching with mild curiosity were now staring, their minds struggling to process the scene. 3 flag officers saluting a woman in a blue shirt. Lieutenant Miller's face, which had been flushed with righteous authority, was now the color of ash. His entire world had just been turned upside down, shaken, and shattered on the floor. Stanton held his salute for a moment longer before dropping it. He then turned his head just slightly, his gaze falling upon Miller for the first time. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of profound, Arctic disappointment. Infinitely worse. He turned back to Allison. "Major, if you'll excuse us for one moment." The aide, a man who knew his boss well, stepped forward and cleared his throat. He didn't need to raise his voice. Every person on that floor was hanging on his every word. "Attention on deck," the commander announced, his voice ringing with formality. "This is Major Allison Grant, United States Marine Corps Reserve. Major Grant is the chief architect and lead strategist for Project Chimera. She served 2 tours in Afghanistan as the lead signals intelligence officer for Joint Special Operations Task Force or RILIUS." The name landed like a bomb. Warlock 6. It was a name whispered in secure communication channels and classified debriefings. It was the ghost in the machine who dismantled entire enemy networks from a keyboard thousands of miles away. The one who could hear a pin drop in a hurricane of signal noise. The operators on the floor, the ones who dealt in shadows and whispers, knew that name. They just never knew it belonged to the calm blonde woman standing before them. "During Operation Spartan Fury," the commander continued, his voice like a hammer striking an anvil, "Major Grant's real-time intelligence fusion prevented a multi-pronged ambush on a SEAL team, saving 14 lives. Her work led to the successful capture of 3 top-tier enemy commanders, effectively collapsing the insurgency's leadership in the northern province. For this, she was awarded the Bronze Star with Valor." The aide finished. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of revelation. Lieutenant Miller looked as if he might faint. He hadn't just made a mistake. He'd insulted a living legend. He'd tried to detain a war hero in front of everyone. Admiral Stanton finally addressed Miller directly. His voice was no longer loud. It was a low, surgical instrument of destruction. "Lieutenant Miller," he began, "you are the watch officer on this floor. Your primary duty is to facilitate the secure and efficient operation of this command. It is not your duty to play gatekeeper based on your own uninformed, spectacularly wrong assumptions. You did not read the credentials. You did not listen to the project name. You saw a woman in civilian clothes and you invented a narrative that fit your prejudices. You have failed in your duties. You have embarrassed this command, and you have insulted a decorated officer from a sister service. Report to my office with your commanding officer at 1400 hours." He didn't wait for a response. He turned back to Allison, his entire demeanor softening. "Major, again, my apologies." Allison gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. But before she moved to follow them, she looked at the shattered young man in the white uniform. She saw the fear and humiliation in his eyes, and in that moment, she chose not to crush him. "Admirals," she said, her voice calm and clear, "Lieutenant Miller was thorough. The security of a facility like this is paramount." She then turned her gaze fully on Miller. "The standard is the standard, Lieutenant. It's the same for everyone. Your only mistake was failing to apply it fairly. Don't see a uniform or a civilian shirt. See the person, read the card, trust the system." It was a masterclass in grace. She hadn't excused his behavior, but she'd offered him a lifeline, a lesson instead of a final damning judgment. It was, in its own way, more devastating than the Admiral's rebuke. It was the wisdom of a true leader. As she said the words, a final fleeting image came to her. The origin of Warlock. Not a battlefield, but a sterile, windowless room at Fort Meade. Her, a young captain then, in front of a bank of monitors, a headset clamped over her ears. For 3 days straight, she'd been hunting for a single ghost-like signal in the electronic ether. Everyone else had given up, convinced it was a dead end. But she persisted, fueled by caffeine and an unshakable belief in the data. And then in the deepest hour of the 3rd night, she found it. A faint, encrypted whisper. Her voice, hoarse but steady, had crackled over the command net. "All stations, this is Grant. I have the trigger." The name had stuck. She'd become the sorcerer of the airwaves. That quiet, relentless focus was the same weapon she'd just deployed on the operations floor. The battle was different, but the principle was the same. See the truth, no matter how it's disguised. Weeks passed. The incident on the operations floor became a quiet, cautionary tale, spreading through the command like wildfire. A mandatory training module on unconscious bias and proper credential verification was swiftly implemented, colloquially known as the Miller Drill. The young lieutenant was formally reprimanded and reassigned to a dreary administrative post in Norfolk. His once bright career prospects now permanently dimmed. One rainy afternoon, Allison was in the base coffee shop reviewing data on a tablet. She heard a tentative voice. She looked up. It was Miller. He looked thinner, humbled. His uniform seemed to hang on him. "Lieutenant," she acknowledged, her tone neutral. "Ma'am, Major Grant," he stammered, standing rigidly at attention. "I just wanted to, I needed to apologize properly. What I did was inexcusable. I was arrogant and I was wrong, completely. I've thought about it every single day since." Allison studied him for a moment. She saw genuine remorse in his eyes. She closed her tablet. "Sit down, Lieutenant," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. He hesitated, then sat stiffly on the edge of the seat. "You made a serious mistake, Miller," she said, her voice soft but firm. "One that could have had major consequences. But you've recognized it. That's the first and most important step. Your career isn't over, but it's different now. You've learned a lesson that some officers never learn." She leaned forward slightly. "Look at the credentials, not the cover. The person in front of you has a story. Your job is to read the official part first. Let that guide you." He stared at her, speechless. He'd expected to be dismissed, to be tolerated at best. He hadn't expected a seed of mentorship. "Thank you, ma'am," he finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. She gave him a simple nod, then reopened her tablet. The moment of instruction over. The lesson delivered. A small piece of a broken career had been set back in place. The story of Major Grant is a testament to the quiet professionals who serve in the shadows, whose valor is measured not in loud explosions, but in silent, brilliant victories. Their battlefield is the unseen world of data and signals. Their courage is the strength to be unassuming in a world that often judges by appearance.